Since they determined they needed to take it part of it down, but it's in wires. Now, you only take part of it, so it looks like some bit of tree.
Right.
It's down right now because of ads.
Oh,
So April 15th until October 15th.
that's really up to me. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't bother me. One way or the other.
That is wow.
It is.
So I just don't worry.
Yeah.
And it's already recording. So. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get started in just another minute or two. We've still got people joining. If you give us just another minute or two. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second session of Southwestern Commission's Area Agency on Aging's Spring Conference, Fostering Connections, the relationship between mental and physical health. And we're so glad that you took the time and energy to join us today. If you were with us last week, you kind of know what we're doing and how we're making this happen. We have a wonderful speaker that's going to join us here in just a few minutes. But it just for logistic purposes, if you want to pin the speaker, you have to go up to your right corner. You'll kind of float your mouse over that. You'll see 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots, you'll be able to pin the speaker on your computer. So that is an option. If you want to see Hollywood Squares, you can see Hollywood Squares. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. We look forward to an awesome session, and I'm going to turn it over to Anna Rogers, who's been our long-term care ombudsman, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anna Rogers, the long-term care ombudsman here at Region A in the AAA. Okay, let's get this started. Let me ask you all a question, and you can either shout it out, you can unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. Ready? What do you think increases dementia by 50%, increases strokes by 32%, and is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day? Shout it out or put it in the chat. Stress, I see isolation, anxiety, lack of oxygen, sure. Stress. Desk job. What else we have? Vaping, adding stress. Diet, okay. All those are definite contributors. Okay, so guess what? It is loneliness. Loneliness increases dementia by 50% and is equivalent to 15 cigarettes per day. Did you also know that 28% of our seniors live alone? So let's see a show of hands, or put something in the chat if anyone has experienced some times of loneliness in the past 2 years during our COVID experience. I have. Anyone else? Yes, I see hands. I see hands. Very good. I think we can all safely say we have experienced loneliness. So we can come from this from a personal perspective. So as leaders and caregivers in the community, this affects you personally, of course, and it affects you professionally. In the next few minutes, you're going to hear from a special speaker today who has personal and professional insight in this topic. She has a master's in social work and is a licensed clinical social worker. With over 20 years of experience, she has a rewarding and varied career in social work. Her clinical work includes experience in residential treatment, wilderness programs, crisis intervention, community mental health, school settings, and private practice. And currently, she specializes in group work, treating depression, anxiety, grief and loss, and trauma with aging population here in Western North Carolina. She works at Senior Life Solutions, which is located in the hospital campus of Swain Community Hospital. In addition to her clinical work, she has experience consulting, supervising, training, and teaching. She is a member of the board of directors for the National Association of Social Workers, the North Carolina chapter, which is dedicated to advocating for the entire profession of social work. So would you please welcome our speaker today, Lisa Dubbert. Yay!
Oh my goodness, what a generous introduction. Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate taking your time being here with you to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit about depression. I understand you've already spent some time talking about that, but when we look at isolation and loneliness, we can't not look at depression. So I'll spend some time kind of looking at that. I was going to introduce myself, but I don't need to do that. I do want to encourage you as we walk through this together, that you engage in the chat in terms of asking questions or connecting with each other, raising your hands down at the bottom of your screen. And I don't know what your screen or what device you're using. You might see something on the bar that says reactions. Feel free to engage that way. If there's a question or you like something that I said, or I said something funny, or you might have noticed something in the chat, but really take an opportunity to find engagement today if that is calling you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I think I can probably do that pretty easily. You might want to put me on the speaker view if that is helpful for you. I know sometimes it is for me. So sorry about that. Where's my screen? There we go. Okay. Is that big enough for everybody to see? I'll make it bigger. Okay. So we're going to talk about some of the big things, right? Depression, isolation, and loneliness. And I don't know if some of you know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? And so some of these things, and when we talk about mental health or mental health awareness, there's some stigma around that. But we're going to talk about big stuff, and we're going to use the words. I'm going to use mental health. I'm going to use depression. I'm going to use the words loneliness and social isolation. You might also notice that I'm going to use words like aging, older, senior citizens, maturing. I work a lot with people 65 and older, and I listen and I hear those terms used interchangeably. So you may not use a term, you may hear a term that I might be using, but it all is interchangeable in terms of who we are and where we are at in life and what we're kind of looking at. So depression, I can't seem to move my slides, Sarah. Let's see here. I'm just going to hit play. How about that? I figured it out. Okay. Nope. So depression, we can't, like I said, we can't look at talking about isolation and loneliness without looking a little bit at depression. And you've heard some statistics already this morning, and I'm going to share just a little bit more of that here today. So depression, sorry, I'm having just a little bit of technical issues over here. Just give me a second. Not sure. There. So depression is a common issue found among older adults, but it's not a given that depression is a part of aging. There are a lot of myths that accompany aging, and one of them is that when we get older, we get depressed, and that's simply not true. It's not a normal part of the aging process. And in fact, there are a lot of studies that show that people are really satisfied with their lives, that they've come to a place where those things early on in our life are no longer an urgency. We're more satisfied with the smaller things, the value of things. And so again, it's not a normal part of aging that we're going to experience depression. However, we do know that late life depression affects about 6 million of us 65 and older. So we do know that it is a factor in the aging process. However, we can find depression throughout the life course. Depression is not typical bereavement. That's when we're mourning the loss of a loved one. It's not typical grief or loss or sadness. Depression is a condition, and it interferes with our ability to function. So when we're sad, right, we're still functioning. We're still able to get our bills paid. We're still able to talk with our families. We may be sad in doing it, but we're still able to function. It's depression, again, is not the same as stress. These things may form, right? They may over time morph into contributing to depression, but they are not depression on their own. We also know that depression is often associated with extending medical illnesses. If we're not feeling good about ourselves and we're not taking care of ourselves, chances are that's going to play itself out in our bodies and when we're recovering. So transitions happen later in life and throughout life. When we are experiencing a transition or a change, we adapt. Some of us are able to adapt and sort of maintain and return to that emotional balance, especially if we're dealing with transitions and change that we have emotional heightness to it. Some of us can manage it, but some of us can't. And when that happens, these factors may morph into depression. We see also that our mental well-being and our physical well-being are very much connected. And so here's some links between depression, which is a mental illness, which is a mental condition, which is a diagnosable health condition. We see how that impacts our physical being. And here I have a list of these diseases that we can see how depression contributes to. If you're not sure about this and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm at risk for heart disease, how does depression contribute to this? I encourage you to speak to your doctor, your provider, and figure out how your current state of being and changes that you may be able to make can improve your ability to cope and improve your physical being. Okay, so these are some lists of symptoms of depression. Now, you might, as I'm talking, you might be thinking to yourself, this is me. This is a real connection with me. And instead of diagnosing yourself, I do want to encourage you to have this discussion with your providers. Share with them what's happening in your life. Explain to them what you're experiencing and feeling and have a collaborative discussion. If you are experiencing depression, reach out. There is effective treatment and there is relief for depression. So when we are depressed, we feel hopeless, right? We feel that there is no light. Depression will close us in. It will box us in. We won't see much hope. So we live an experience of hopelessness. Sadness. Now, this is persistent sadness. This is persistent crying. This isn't just here and there. This is chronically happening. When we're depressed, we might be experiencing irritability. We might be short with people. We might be experiencing more anger. When we experience depression, we might have symptoms around thoughts of death and suicide. And sometimes those thoughts of death and suicide are very close together. And sometimes there's a little bit of space between them. So when we think about the space between the thoughts of death and suicide, when we think about thoughts of death, they may look like, I'm older, I'm 85. So how many more Christmases do I really have left? A thought of death might look like, I really need to get my affairs in order so my children don't have to deal with all of my things. A thought of death might be, if I go to bed tonight and I don't wake up, I might, that might be okay. So when those thoughts of death become more frequent, become more intense, and the thoughts shift from a thought to maybe an option or maybe a plan, then we're sort of leaning into looking at a suicidal thought or suicidal plan. And if you are experiencing that, I encourage you to reach out for help, and you will feel relief. One thing I want to share about depression is that it will lie to you. It will tell you things that are not true. It'll tell you that there is no hope. It will tell you that you are not worth things. Suicide will do the same thing. It will tell you a lie. So if you are finding yourself feeling that distress, then I encourage you to shake that lie up and go find the truth and reach out and get some support and some help. Depression will contribute to a sense of worthlessness and helplessness, and we'll feel guilty. We'll go over things that we did in the past and we have a hard time letting go. We'll question our value. We'll feel that things will never change. And this is depression whispering in our ear. We might experience unexplained weight gain or loss. We might have sleep disturbances. When we are depressed, no matter how much sleep we get, we will feel tired and fatigued. It will lull us back to sleep. To live our life, we need energy, and depression will take that away from us. We may have difficulty concentrating, making decisions, having doubt with what it is that we should be doing. And depression takes our joy. It takes all of our joy away from us. And it will lie to us and tell us that the things that we used to enjoy, we no longer enjoy. So depression is a mental health condition. It's a diagnosable condition. Loneliness and isolation contribute to that condition. So let's just take a little deeper look into loneliness and isolation. So loneliness is a feeling of being alone, regardless if there's social contact. So we're all here together, right? You can see me, I can see some of you, but we may be in this experience together and be feeling very alone. Someone in our home or someone in our workplace, we're feeling alone in the sense that nobody sees us, nobody hears us, that we can be around in a group, but that loneliness interferes with our ability to interact with other people, even if we are in contact with others. Social isolation is the lack of social connections, right? So if I don't have social connections, if I don't know who my people are or how to get information, I'm going to find myself alone. I'm going to find myself wondering how to solve these problems by myself. Social isolation can lead to loneliness in some people, right? While others can feel lonely without being socially isolated. We can be home and alone and not feel lonely. We can be in a group of people and feel and experience loneliness. Just some more thoughts on loneliness. So isolation is a problem, right? We know that this is a long-standing problem, and we know that it places millions of us at poor risk, at poor health and risk for prolonged loneliness and illnesses. So what contributes to isolation? Well, we're watching a lot of TV. We're spending a lot of time inside. We might find ourselves on our screen playing a game or watching television, and hours have gone by and maybe we haven't talked to somebody. Maybe we've looked down and we've missed phone calls. Our concern about crime might also contribute to loneliness. We may be worried that as we get older, we may appear more vulnerable or even feel more vulnerable, that we may be more susceptible to crime, and we don't want to put ourselves in danger. Falling is a real concern as we get older, and it will interfere with our ability to accept invitations to go out. If I have to walk across a field and I'm afraid of falling, I don't want to go. I may not tell people I'm afraid of falling, but I'm gonna stay back. I might be nervous about climbing in and out of a car. I might fall on my way out of the car. Maybe I don't want to ask for a hand and in assistance in some way. And so I don't want to face that risk. So I stay back, I stay away. And what's happening as I refuse those invitations, people are going and they're creating their community. They're creating relationships with each other. And because I'm not there, I'm not a part of that. So we can see how the fear of falling can really impact our ability to feel comfortable socializing. So we've got little contact with neighbors, geographical isolation, right? We live in the mountains, beautiful places, but sometimes we are miles away, a mile away. We might live in communities where maybe there are 2 or 3 of us in a community, and the rest of our summer people, and we don't really know how to make connections with those people that are there part-time. We might have found great comfort in retiring to the mountains or living in our mountain, but now as we get older, we look at that as more of a challenge. Maybe we used to walk, but now we feel uncomfortable because our sidewalk, our driveway is too steep. Maybe the rain or the length of time it takes to drive somewhere interferes with our ability to feel safe driving, so we don't go. So it keeps us home and isolated. Technology can feel very overwhelming, right? People can say to us, well, you can go look at your medical portal through your doctor, and that technology feels overwhelming. I just want to call my doctor's office and have them tell me, and I get rerouted to an answering machine that tells me to go look back at the website. So technology can make me feel isolated. COVID, of course, has contributed to that sense of disconnection and away from each other. We know that isolation can and does lead to physical, psychological, and social issues for us as we get older. So just more on social isolation and our body. And we already saw one of the information that I have on my slide already this morning about that loneliness has significant risk factors. One is comparison to smoking cigarettes, damaging as obesity. We see connections with heart disease and high blood pressure. We see sleep disorders. We recognize that loneliness can wreak havoc on our immune system and can lead to other health conditions. So much like depression, we see how our mental well-being, our emotional state can have a direct impact on our physical being. When we are isolated, we don't have a support system. We lack the support system. And I've outlined 3 major support systems that we rely on as we move through life. One, of course, is our emotional support. And these are the people in our lives that we go to when we want to share something that's bothering us, when we want to share something that's funny, when we want to vent, when we want to complain about people in our family, when we want to tell them good news. We rely on that emotional support, and it's very rewarding to be emotionally connected with somebody. We feel seen, we feel heard. Informational support, right? Like, how do we do stuff? How do I sign up for insurance? How do I make sure that my bills are paid on time through my bank? How do I know which trip to take or which product to purchase for myself? I don't know who to turn to or who to ask. I might have a child that I could call, but I convince myself that I might be a burden and I don't want to reach out to them, or I don't want to call the bank or my financial advisor to ask because I don't want to bother them. And it's such a silly question. So we might pull back from our resources as well. So instrumental support as we get older, right? Well, the idea of climbing a ladder to change the light bulb feels pretty daunting. And if no one is around, or we're looking around and we don't see anybody, or more importantly, if we are living in the lens of depression, depression will have us look around and not see that we have support. It will lie to us and tell us not to call the people that we need to call. It will lie to us and discourage us from reaching out and calling transit and saying, I need a ride to Asheville because I don't want to drive myself there because I'm worried about driving. Depression will lie to us and tell us not to do that, because when we are actively taking steps, when we are actively engaging and moving away from our isolation and loneliness, we're inadvertently turning down depression. It doesn't have our attention anymore. It's somewhere else. But depression will lie to us and lull us back there. So we just want to pay attention to what it's saying to us. So we do know that about a quarter of Americans 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. We do know that. We do know that a significant proportion of adults in the US have reported feeling lonely. So we're using those words now more than ever about feeling lonely. We know that people 50 or older, we have more life experiences, which could contribute to social isolation or loneliness, right? We might be living alone now, 50 and older, right? Our children might be gone, our grandchildren might be gone. We might have moved away. We might have gotten a divorce. Our partner might have passed away. So we're living alone. We're experiencing more loss than we ever have in this time in our life, right? Loss of family, loss of friends, loss of identity as we retire, maybe loss of our physical being as our body changes due to medical needs. So we've experienced a lot of loss. We might be living with a chronic illness or chronic pain that contributes to our sense of isolation or loneliness. If I have a back problem and the idea of getting up and out of my house is so painful that I just stay in my spot because if I move just a little bit, I'll experience this sharp pain. The choice between the pain and staying still, the still part seems more comforting to me because I don't have to, because the pain is painful. And then people might question whether or not I'm actually experiencing pain, or they might question my physical being. And I don't really always have to want to share what's happening with me, or I might even feel embarrassed or shamed of my physical condition. If I have an ostomy bag, I might not want to go out to dinner and talk with people. So again, what I'm experiencing in my environment, in my life, may be pulling me away from people. If I have trouble hearing, I'm tired of telling people, can you say that again? I'm not really sure what you had to say. And maybe I relied on lip reading during that time, but then masks came along and it made it even more challenging for me to communicate and participate in a distance way that I was able to do. Isolation and loneliness we can experience it periodically throughout our life. And we do know that when we're younger, we can experience loneliness and social isolation. We can experience it in our 30s, our 50s, our 70s, or we can also fall in the category of experiencing that loneliness and isolation chronically for quite some time. In fact, when we think about chronic situations, if we've been living with loneliness prior to the pandemic, if we've been isolated prior to the pandemic, we might have felt very little change in our lives during the pandemic. And we might have just become accustomed to living in a chronic state of loneliness and social isolation. Not that we've wanted it, not that we haven't tried to fix it, but now it may just become a part of like, this is how my life is. And depression will tell us that there is no hope in changing that. Depression will lie to us again and tell us that, it's always going to be this way. If we're struggling with isolation and loneliness, if we have mobility issues, if it's hard to move around, again, that's going to keep us in. If we've lost our loved one, if we've lost our partner, our husband, our wife, our companion, and we live in a world of duo and we are one, we're not sure where we fit in anymore. We may have friends that say, come and join us or come and talk, but it may be awkward and uncomfortable for us. We're not sure who to sit with or where to be. We might, again, experience multiple losses in our small social networks. If we are living alone, we may not have someone to talk to regularly, daily. If we are struggling with isolation and loneliness, we might have an increased limit on our social spheres, right? It gets smaller and smaller. If I was participating in a craft and that suddenly my depression says, you don't want to go to that anymore, it's just easier to stay home, suddenly my world becomes smaller. My experiences become smaller. When we are lonely and isolated, we are experiencing emotional pain. And sometimes around emotional pain, we feel shame. Somehow loneliness is a character flaw. We think we don't want to tell anybody we're lonely because we might think, what's wrong with them that they don't have anybody in their lives, right? But what we just saw from some statistics is that we are experiencing loneliness way more than we're often sharing with people. If we share with people that we're lonely, we might find that we're a little less lonely. But if we have emotional pain, most of us don't really want to entertain that pain. We'll spend a lot of time avoiding it. When we're struggling with isolation and loneliness, we have lost our sense of connection and community in the world, and that can change how we see the world. If we are looking at the world that there is nobody and we are feeling alone and depression is lying to us and telling us that is the case, we have lost our connection. We've lost a sense of who we are in the bigger place of things. If we're struggling with cultural issues, if we have a language barrier, if we're not sure where our community is, our ethnic community or our racial community is, we might struggle with isolation and loneliness. If we experience discrimination based on our age, our race, our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, or our gender identity, we may very much feel isolated and alone. And so then add to that COVID-19, right? That just exacerbated our sense of loneliness and isolation. But even before COVID, let's not forget that we were still struggling with isolation and feeling lonely. You know, more than 40% of people 60 and older reported feeling lonely. We were already experiencing loneliness. An unexpected outcome of the pandemic is that we've been using those words. We've been having national discussions about loneliness and isolation. When for many people who are living in facilities during the pandemic, we were even more isolated. We couldn't get to our people couldn't get to us. If we were having people come into our home to help us with either healthcare or things around the house or projects around the house, we were afraid of letting people come in, right? We were afraid to get sick. We were afraid to leave the house. We didn't want to go into the grocery stores. We were canceling our medical appointments. And for some of us, those activities, going to the grocery store, going to the post office, and going to our doctor's appointments are some of the few social contacts that many isolated adults have. So some of us experienced increased loneliness and mental health issues around anxiety and depression during the pandemic. There was a peak of that. Some of us subsided. We kind of self-soothed either in healthy ways or unhealthy ways. We kind of managed. It kind of became the new normal and we were functioning. But for some of us, that loneliness and that anxiety and depression has become chronic or exacerbated and an already standing condition. Again, some people felt very little change in their experiences if they were already isolated. There was the stigma associated with loneliness and isolation that started to kind of shake a little bit. We were talking more and more about what that experience has been like for us. We were missing things in our lives. We were missing major milestones, holidays, baptisms, funerals. And when we experience major milestones with family and friends, that sense of stress bonds us together. We create memories. We create connections with each other. When we're not having those, or when they're happening independent of us, we are disconnected from that. We don't have that memory or those bonds to, or those traditions that we were used to that continued to build strength around those things. We experience loss around that. So I'm just going to pause here for a second and see if there are questions or comments. So quiet.
Lisa, I'll just make the comment that I like how you say that depression lies to you. That's been one of the biggest things I've been trying to overcome lately is not believing every single thought that you have, you know, because I'll think something negative and it's just like, well, if it's in my mind, then it's just fact, you know, and that's not true. You know, we think all kinds of things that just are not true. And so it's hard to realize that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just because we're thinking it doesn't mean that it's true, right? And that's such a strange statement because how could it not be true? This is my life experience. I'm thinking it, it's me. But oftentimes, you know, if we write down what we're thinking, just write, you know, just do a stream of consciousness, write down what you're thinking, and then just underline the facts, right? Most of the time, if we do a stream of consciousness, it's with fillers, it's opinions, it's all the color, all the filter stuff that we buy into without just kind of looking at the facts. But thank you for your comment about that. Depression will lie to us. It robs us, and it will tell us things that are simply not true. And if it's loud, which can happen if we're experiencing episodes of depression, if it is loud, it will have our attention and it gets a lot of practice. What we want to do is shift out of that and practice other things, other thoughts. So I like how you said, I got to tell myself that I'm not doing that. Others? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about shifting out of loneliness. I'm going to try and share again. So when we talk about shifting out of loneliness, what we're going to look at here is the recognition that shifting out of loneliness is going to require that we take action. It will require that we will take action, even if it's just a little bit. If you find that after every day at 4 o'clock, you're watching Dr. Phil till 7:30 and you're like, I don't want to do that anymore. The first step that we can take maybe is move from the chair that we sit in when we watch that to something else, right? It requires action, and we can take little action. It requires that we become curious. If I change this little thing, what will happen? If I take this action, what will happen? If I make the phone call first to get into connection with someone, what will happen? It requires that we are willing to begin to believe that there's hope, right? If we think back to that hopelessness piece about depression, depression will make us believe there is no hope. So shifting out of loneliness requires that we are willing to begin to believe that there is hope. So what are some ways maybe that we can look a little bit more at that? So stay connected. I can't stress that enough around reducing our experience with isolation and loneliness. We want to stay connected. One thing we can do to begin to increase our connection is to be honest, is to be vulnerable with a safe person in our life and say, I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling invisible. I don't feel like I'm valuable anymore, right? When we can find someone that we feel safe with, and we can take that first connection of saying, this is my feeling, this is my experience, we may begin to feel relief almost immediately. We won't feel 100% better, but we may begin to feel relief immediately, because loneliness tells us that nobody sees us. And when we share that vulnerability with someone that we feel safe with, even if we have to shake it a little bit and make raise our courage to do it, we will find connection. We will feel seen. We will feel heard. So we want to stay connected in any way that we possibly can, in whatever way that looks like for you. People have leaned heavy on communication technologies. You want to find a way for meaningful activities that feel purposeful, that feel enriching, that feel like, hey, this is how I used to feel like if we're experiencing depression. Sometimes we wait for motivation, and I'm not a person that believes in motivation. That if we are waiting to be happy, we will be waiting forever. Waiting is not coming. Happiness is not coming to us. We have to bring that. Happiness won't come to us. We have to make those decisions to bring us closer to that happiness. So we want to stay connected. We want to engage in a hobby, one that maybe we used to love and depression told us that we were no good at it anymore. We didn't like it anymore. Maybe we want to bring some of those things back out and dive back into them. Keeping a schedule can help with purpose and keeping the day flowing, especially if several days go by before we're in connection with someone. We might reach out to people in our life to stay connected, and they may not be able to see us or talk to us for several days. So what do we do in the meantime? We keep a schedule to help us make sense and purpose of keeping the day moving through. We may even want to schedule time during the day or the week to talk to people that are important to us. If you talk to your mother-in-law every night at, every Tuesday at 6:30, that may become a long-standing appointment that becomes a part of your schedule that helps reduce some of that isolation. We want to encourage physical movement, of course. Some people like pets, want a pet that can help with loneliness and isolation. I do, just be aware of the commitment it takes when you adopt a pet or bring a pet home. It may be more than some of us. The idea of a pet sounds lovely, but boy, at 3 a.m. in the morning when that puppy's barking, maybe it may not sound so great then. So just be aware of what your limitations are. Maybe fish are better pet for you than maybe a puppy might be. The local library has a lot of resources for you, and they also, offer tutoring around certain things to get involved online. If your bank says, hey, you've got to start paying your bill online and you're not sure what to do, the library can be a resource. Now, don't be giving them your bank information, but what you can do is look to them for that informational support, right? And some of that guidance that we talked about earlier. Be assertive, introduce yourself to somebody. The worst they can do is turn around and leave, right? But you're not waiting for somebody to come to you. You're taking the initiative to reduce some of your isolation and your loneliness. And who knows who's on the other side of that hello. We often find support and faith-based organizations. Look to your area resources for support. Find out what's going on. Pick up the phone and call if that feels comfortable. Maybe you're not feeling comfortable doing that, maybe get one of your friends and the two of you can motivate each other to make the call and find out what's happening. Book clubs are always helpful. I had worked with someone not too long ago that had a book club with their grandchild. The grandchildren were reading the books. They live in different states. They were each reading the books, different states. They would talk every Sunday at a certain time over the chapters that they had. Now, the books that the kids chose, but the point is that you're having connection, right? You're making an opportunity with your grandchildren. And maybe your children are psyched that they're talking to you so they can get some things going, but they have that memory with you around having that book club. And that could be with anybody. I just use the grandchildren as an example. And you want to send, you want to create opportunity for yourself. Loneliness and depression make the world very small. And if we're home and that's where we are and we struggle getting out and about, the world becomes small. I see something. Are you talking to me?
Lisa, you've got a, I'm sorry, you've got a comment in the chat.
Wish I could do some small changes. I seem to go head first with drastic changes. Yes. Yeah. I bet we can all, I bet we can all relate to that, right? That is the curse of perfectionism. That is the curse of all or nothing thinking, right? If I'm going to quit smoking today, let's say I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes. This is my habit. I'm going to quit today. There's no possible way I'm going to quit cold turkey 2 packs today. It's just not going to happen. But what I am going to do is maybe I'm going to take a couple cigarettes out of that and throw them away. And maybe I'm going to do that each week. Maybe I'm going to sign up with the government to get, encouraging text messages. But when we think it's all or nothing, we set ourselves up for failure. And then depression says, see, don't even bother to try because you didn't do it right and you didn't do it perfectly. Right? A gift we can give ourselves is to rest in the fact that we are imperfect, that we will never do anything 100% perfect. That if I make a small change and I make that small change on Tuesday and that small change loses my attention on Wednesday, but it gains my attention again on Thursday, that counts. It's the trajectory that we want to go on. We want to take little small steps. Big drastic changes feel overwhelming. It just feels overwhelming. We can't keep up that momentum, right? We think we can, maybe on Monday, right? Monday's always the day, but what happens on Tuesday? What happens on Wednesday? So we want to be compassionate with ourselves and say like, you know what? I made a mistake. I did this. I smoked that cigarette, but I put it out. And the next cigarette that I think about taking, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to call Sarah Jane and she's going to say, Lisa, put the cigarette away, right? I have a chance every single time when I'm faced with that decision. But perfectionism and all or nothing thinking is a curse for us. But we do it because we want to be perfect. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And I'm not smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I'm definitely not. Other questions or thoughts? Okay. Guess I'll just keep going. Send notes, mail. I can't tell you how exciting it was to get mail over the pandemic. And I worked with many people who are writing letters to people. So, and there are organizations that kind of do some phone chains and some letter writing. And actually writing is a very cathartic and therapeutic exercise. If you struggle with anxiety, I'll just throw, I know we're not talking about anxiety today, but that can be a nice way to slow things down. If we think much quicker than we speak. And we speak much quicker than we write. So if we can slow it down with writing, even if it's just a grocery list, or even if it's just a stream of consciousness, we can find relief with that. So writing can be a very helpful exercise. Okay. Again, just stay connected, as I keep highlighting and expressing to us all. It's really important to be able to do that. Oh. Sorry. So another way that we can reduce some loneliness is, to tap into some of our creativity and maybe bring along others in that creativity. As the world is starting to open up a little bit, there may be classes and things, depending on how comfortable you feel, depending on your awareness of your medical needs and physical needs around COVID. There are more and more options. The Senior Center in Jackson County was doing and continues to do lots of services. And I'll tell you, and I won't name names, but the Jackson County Senior Center was full moving, and there were other senior centers that were not. So thank you for whoever was making sure that that was happening. So you want to, maybe you've got a project that you want to dive into, and maybe you're looking at old photos. Maybe you encourage your grandchildren or people around you. If you are somebody in a position to create opportunity for others, then please do that in your neighborhoods and around in your churches and your organizations. If you're aware that people in your life are lonely, reach out to them. Check in with them. Ask them, are you feeling lonely? I've had some lonely experiences. Were you feeling lonely? Again, if we can have some of those authentic conversations, that can really help with staying connected and feeling seen. Our living situations, if we're living alone, that can feel great and wonderful. For some of us, we need to reflect, is this still suiting me? Does living alone still suit me? I might still be mobile and independent and aware, but does living alone suit me? Am I lonely? Can I change that? Should I change that? What would it look like to change that? If we're depressed, however, and we've got issues that we are not really addressing successfully, we'll take ourselves wherever we go. So if we think if we move somewhere and it's going to be better and we still haven't kind of dealt with stuff, we're going to take it with us. I'm talking about a living situation in the sense of, can I live in a more populated area? Should I move from where I am, where I'm so isolated, and move closer into town or closer to family? Should I move to another state? So that's what I'm kind of addressing when I'm looking at living situations. And of course, that self-compassion. When we think, oh, I'm lonely, we think I shouldn't be lonely. There's something wrong with me, right? There's more right with us than there is wrong with us. Loneliness is an emotional experience. We are human beings with dynamic emotional lives. We are not intended not to have those experiences. So if we are feeling lonely, it's okay. It doesn't mean that we're a bad person. It doesn't mean that we've done something wrong. It just means at this moment, at this time, this is my emotional experience. I'm feeling loneliness. All right, I'm gonna stop again, just aware of our time. Questions? More? What's been people's experiences kind of shifting out of loneliness? And please feel free to add those into the chat, or you can speak them out loud. What's your experience shifting out of loneliness? Have you been able to do it? Has it been helpful to talk to people? Are you noticing maybe you didn't really struggle with loneliness, but maybe people around you struggled with loneliness, and you're seeing a difference, or maybe you did something to contribute to lessening their loneliness? Oh, Kelly, great. Thank you. There's a great link in here. Social wellness check-in calls to isolated people in Western North Carolina. Wonderful. Okay. Are you feeling lonely today? It's quiet out there.
No, I think Lisa, it was a whole lot easier to shut down and close in.
Can't hear you, Sarah.
Okay.
I could hear you, Sarah, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, it was a whole lot easier to close down when COVID hit than it is to figure out when to open back up. And I think that's some of what our older adults are dealing with and facing. I know we are dealing with that here at AAA, and our senior centers are as well, trying to figure out the balance between social isolation and socialness, along with health and safety.
Right.
And I think, you know, I've said this numerous times to all our directors, it's a whole lot easier to shut down than it is to think about opening back up, because we know so much more, I think,
Right.
on the health and safety issue. And the older adults were the first target. I use that word loosely, but I mean, when COVID hit, it was all about older adults and keeping them safe. And then it grew and grew and grew. And so I think, you know, for our folks, it's trying to decide, am I used to being social isolated, and am I okay with that versus potentially my health and safety?
Yeah. Yeah. Some people are comfortable, right? They're not even sure they want to head back out. It's comfortable. And then if I do head out, what does that look like? And we don't know. We don't know. Just a lot of questions and assessment.
Exactly. And so us as caregivers, either personally or professionally, because I went through it with my mother, where do we draw that line? You know, where do we allow them the opportunity to choose? And where do we say, let's do something different? You know, that's a hard line, and it's different for everybody, I think. That it wasn't different behavior for my mother. She'd been like that for 30 years. But it is different behavior for some folks. And so those of us working with them or loving them, you know, what do we do? How do we do that?
Yeah. It's a topic that we just keep revisiting because we're not sure. You know, we wanted to, you know, we're all, you know, from the beginning, right? Everyone was doing the best they could with what they had. Like, how do we do this? We're flying by the seat of our pants, and the transition out continues to be that way. Like, what do we do and how do we do it? And what is the safety there? We do, you know, there was an article I read early on that people, you know, there was that let's protect people 65 and older, but there was also this whole part that, in fact, out of demographic group, they were handling the pandemic the best because they had already lived through life. They had already been through major things and thought, well, this is just one more thing, we'll be fine. Right. It was all the other people who were like, well, where am I going to get my Starbucks from? We were like, you know what, we'll be fine. We'll be able to manage it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is so true, and I think, you know, you hear that amongst our network, that we just continued taking care of people like we had for a long period of time. We shifted a little bit, but we kept taking care of people, and then folks that weren't in our network started saying, "Oh, who's taking care of the older people? Who's taking care of the older people?" Well, we are, and we still will be.
Yeah. And, you know, it's great that we have these formal resources, but among us in our communities, we have informal resources. We have each other, we have family, we have friends, you know, and again, I can't stress enough how depression, you know, the blinders that it will put on us. It will tell us that we don't have anybody. It'll tell us that we are lonely. It'll tell us that it'll never change. So, you know, we want to shake that. And some of that, you know, like I said, requires that we take action, and little action. You know, a phone call can make a significant difference. A text can make a difference, but it does require that we practice it, that we continue to practice it so it gets stronger. You know, what we practice grows stronger. So if I practice my depression, it's going to get big. If I practice shifting out of loneliness, that's going to get my attention. That's going to get bigger. And I'm going to inadvertently turn down depression because I'm somewhere else. I'm engaged somewhere else. So
Yeah,
depression.
I really like that. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and they're all, depression, isolation, loneliness, they're friends. They want to find each other. They're going to hang out. So we want to keep them far apart from each other. Well, let's see. There's some, thank you, Debbie, to all the staff. It's certainly a group effort. It sounds like people are doing great work out there. Someone's asking for resources. That was it in the chat. Well,
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your presentation today. You have aptly described the theme of our spring conference, the connection and relationship between our mental and our physical health. And we appreciate that. We hear you telling us to shift our reality, to develop more connections, and to reach out for support. And that nothing is 100% perfect. We're just trying, and you're taking the step, and that's what matters. So we thank you so much for your insight into depression and loneliness, into isolation. We thank you again for being our guest speaker today. You were wonderful. Does anyone have any last questions for Lisa before we move on to ending the conference? We've got some things at the end, so don't go away. Any last questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Lisa. We really appreciate you being with us today. Hold on, everyone. We're going to do a drawing for our conference prize in just a minute, but we want you to join us next week for the next spring conference session called We're in This Together panel. It is discussion with our 3 special speakers with amazing information to share with you. So Kelly, what do you have? We're doing a drawing for our conference prize. What do you have?
All right. So in honor of this being our second session, I picked 22. And person 22 on my participants list is, drum roll, Nancy Helms. So congrats, Nancy. You are
Nancy Helms. Yay, Nancy. Congratulations. If you can see me in the box, if you would like to pin me, I'll show you what you've won.
Okay.
You have the Spring Aging Conference Embracing Aging shirt from last week.
Oh, thank you.
And the matching bag with some goodies. And
Thank you. Thank you.
to come out of our depression, social isolation, we have you a traveling duffel bag. Uh-oh, someone's on.
Thank you.
Someone's
Thank
got a
you.
call.
Thank you.
You have a smart grooming kit for traveling. A his and hers and some earbuds. So thank you, Nancy. Congratulations on that. And we hope that everyone is able to join us next week. And I'll let Sarah say goodbye.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably muted. I muted everybody. No, I'm good. I'm technologically challenged and I fully admit that. The first 2 sessions have exceeded our expectations here at the AAA, and I hope that they have exceeded your expectations. I hope you'll join us next week. It certainly will be a banner session with the panel. And then we have 2 more sessions. We'll talk a little bit more about them next week. So have a good rest of your day and go out and enjoy a little bit of sunshine and join us next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.